Hi there, I'm Katie Cat, and this is our weekly Astro Tarot. I'm going to start off this week's reading with just looking at what's going on with the sky. Let's see, when the sun rose today, we would have seen it aligned with the planet of Venus. We wouldn't be able to see Venus, however, because the sun is too bright. Mercury is close within scope, just away by a couple of degrees. We have Chiron also over in Aries at around the 20th degree. We have Uranus over here at 23 degrees of Taurus. Jupiter over here in Gemini, Mars at 21 degrees. Is it 21? It might be 22. I believe it is actually 21 degrees of Cancer. And then we have the moon over here in the sign of Capricorn, and Pluto over here in the beginning degrees of Aquarius. We also have Saturn and Neptune over here in the sign of Pisces, along with the North Node. Now, you'll see that the moon is currently in its waning phase, so it's actually reducing in size. If you got up earlier today, right after the sun rose, and up until about, now, actually, you would have been able to see a waning crescent of the moon in the daytime up in the sky. And then tonight you will be able to see Jupiter right around the time that the sun sets over, beyond on the western side of the zenith position, and then Mars right around zenith position as the sun sets. Because we see this grouping of planets over here all kind of clumped on one side. Now, the interesting factor about this week astrologically is that the planet Venus and the sun are at the exact same degree today. So it's like Venus is bringing her message to the heart of the sun. Even though it takes Venus roughly around 245 days to move around its orbit around the sun, they won't actually meet this point again in this exact degree and alignment for 8 years, just because of Venus's retrogrades and where they will actually be aligning. The interesting thing that I want to bring up, though, is that we are currently seeing Mars over here in the sign of Cancer. It's at 21 degrees of Cancer, and it will be moving into the sign of Leo in about 1 month's time. And the reason why I think that's something that's notable is because at that point, it will be in opposition to the position of Pluto, and Mars is a planet of action. And when, of course, it gets to the point of when it's at 23 degrees or 24 degrees of Leo, it will then be in a square position with Uranus. And Uranus is a planet of unexpected, unavoidable changes, and that's going to be in June. The reason why I believe it's kind of calling that to our attention is because we have a couple of cards in this week's tarot that highlight the Leo energy. And they also highlight kind of the energetic of the sun and where the sun is right now. So I think the biggest transits that we are going to be experiencing this week are in alignment with that, along with the eclipse that we'll be experiencing in exactly 1 week's time, which will be in the sign of Aries. Now, we have the sun currently in Aries, so it's kind of initiating that point. But as you may have observed, if you have any planetary placements close to those nodal points, whenever there is an eclipse, they can cause some really big changes and big shifts, big closures and big new beginnings in our lives. So we could be looking at that quite a bit this week. Let's see. Now, if we jump into the cards for this week, we have 6 cards. Only one major arcana, though, and that's why I said the Leo energies are actually going to be what's poignant, or I guess the strongest energy for the next week to the next month's time. We'll be seeing a lot of changes that will be drawing upon our strength. The strength is a major arcana card. It's asking us to be aware of our willfulness and what calls us to engage, and how we can have courage in a situation, but also have self-control and self-discipline. We see a woman who looks like she just crossed over a bridge. She has her arm around what looks like the chin of a lion that has a ball at its feet, and above her head is a snake in the position of a infinity sign. And then she has a basket on her back that has some, wheat and herbs and things that she's gathered along her way. But the energy of this card highlights the placement of the sun, because the sun governs the sign of Leo. The sun just moved into the sign of Aries, which is a active fire sign. Aries is our sense of self, how we show up in the world. It's how we grow from the childlike self to the more developed, more aware, more mature self. And this is interesting because we have, some planets right now that are in this space, which are retrograde. We have Mercury retrograde, we have Venus retrograde, and Venus is directly in alignment with the placement of the sun, as if she's bringing this message back. She's bringing something back to our essential self for us to review, along with Mercury, which is a communication or an idea or some thought or something that we are revisiting that we have not thought about, but, in a while. It's bringing that back to the essential self before it moves forward. And then the other planetary positions that are in the sign of Aries, we have Chiron, which Chiron is the wounded healer. And so it's like bringing this energetic of what we need to heal in order to shift into this place of what we're going to be, letting go of, to be rebirthing or bringing something into form in our lives. Because you have to consider that Pluto over in Aquarius, which is the opposite sign to Leo, is the fixed air sign. It's the power of knowledge. It's the power of knowing something. And so I do think that there's some type of knowing, some realization, some experience that we've gone through, which is making us see things in a new light and asking us to live our lives in a different way. Now, this card is asking us to have some kind of sense of courage around risk and being able to face the unknown, but also having some kind of self-control in that unknown, so we don't lose ourselves to it, so that we don't lose ourselves to anger, we don't lose ourselves to people's aggression. There's this, old saying that it was like, if somebody shows up to your door or just, is throwing a fit around you, it's like they're probably just having a bad day. It's not something that is personal to you. And if you feel that it is, then, perhaps that's something you can talk about and work out with that person rather than assuming the worst. Now, the challenge that came out for this week is actually pretty interesting, because it actually came through as two cards. Like, usually when I pull cards, I'll spread all the cards out on the table, and then I'll lightly kind of drag my fingers across the cards and see which ones come out. And these two came out together. And so we have the 10 of Cups, which is an expectation around happily ever after and what that looks like and how people should behave, and how we expect people to be in the world, right? Like, if you're a good person, people will be good too. That's not necessarily the case. If you do good things, if you go to school and you pay all your bills, everything should work out right in your job, right? Like, that's not how things always work, and we've seen that in the last 5 years. There is no reliability, even when you do what is expected of you. But this card was paired with the 7 of Pentacles, which is all about having patience around some kind of material situation. So there's some challenge that we're all working with right now, which is like, okay, well, maybe we all are questioning, like, what do we actually want? What is actually important to us in the grand scheme of things? Because what we had planned for and built up is kind of unraveling in front of us. And so the question is, what do you ultimately value? What do you put your energy and effort toward? Because this is the gardener that we see in this 7 of Pentacles. And they learn every season that they garden, and they have to have patience and see how their efforts bear fruit. If they plant something on the east side of the building, or the east side of a tall crop versus the west side versus the south side versus the north side, how does that affect their crop? How does that affect their harvest? How does it affect your life, depending on where you plant yourself and what you surround yourself with, right? And do you have the observation and an ability to witness how those experiences and those environments affect you, or perhaps even those people. And what do you want to nurture in your life? What do you want to have time for? There's this energetic that they're setting something of value to the side. We see that they have a wand, that they're leaning on, and they have this pentacle between two of their boots. And the two boots in this particular deck, and actually in most traditional tarot decks, in the Seven of Pentacles, there's two different colored boots, which means that they're kind of balancing two different needs, or the expectations of two different worlds. And so in a lot of ways, because these two cards came out together, I think that there is something that we have to allow to happen. There's some experience that will reveal something to us, that will give us clarity around the direction and the course that we have to take. And that is likely going to be around this eclipse that we are going to be experiencing, because it does create really big shifts in our lives, especially if you have planetary placements around that pivotal point. Now, the way through the challenge showed up as the Two of Wands. So the Two of Wands, we see someone who has a wand that's bolted to the building behind them, and then they have a wand in their hand, and they're looking out across, off on this balcony that they're standing on, to the land around them. There's a waterway in front of them, there's some mountains, and they have this orb or this sphere in their hand, and they're looking out as if they're imagining their dominion and where they want to go and what they want to do next. It's kind of the call of the wild. It's the call to something new. And yet this second wand that's bolted to the building behind them is reminding them that there's something that they have to tend to. There's something that they have to take care of before they can actually embark on that kind of new adventure. When you consider you have like a staff, you're usually moving in a forward motion. But if you have a staff that's also bolted behind you, there's something that's kind of pulling your attention in two different directions. And so there is something that ultimately we have to tend to and we have to take care of before we can, realize or actualize this kind of happily ever after, the sense of openness towards something new. Now, the ultimate outcome, we have two cards. The first of which is the Nine of Cups. So we go from the 10 of Cups to a 9 of Cups, which is interesting because a 10 is usually some kind of crystallization. It speaks to like expectations and, ideal situations that ultimately lead to some kind of dissatisfaction, right? Because if we have expectations and something doesn't live up to that, well, then there's disappointment. But the 9 is a different energetic. It's an energetic of some kind of completion. And we see someone who has this sense of satisfaction around some kind of project that they've completed. And there's this sense of satiation around emotional experience. So there is kind of this refinement of, maybe that is part of it, that we have to let go of this conditioning that we've been raised with around what happily ever after looks like, and realize that every day is going to be shifting from this day forward, and that the expectations in of themselves are what is leading us to be the most frustrated. Whereas if we face each day a single day at a time and lend our gratitude and our satisfaction around what we were able to experience and explore in that day, then it offers an entirely different emotional experience to us, because that's the taste and that's the flavor that we're ultimately like putting inside of our body and inside of our mind, and that we're impressing upon ourselves through our own emotional measure or measuring tool. Now, the final card is interesting because it's another card that references the sign of Leo. We had the opening card, which is the Strength card, which is the major arcana, which references the sign of Leo. And then we have our final card for this week, which is the King of Wands, which references fixed fire, which ultimately is the sign of Leo, and this sign of leadership and leading with our heart and letting our heart guide us, because Leo governs the actual cardiovascular system of the body as well as the emotional heart. And what does it mean to lead by example rather than leading with a big stick? Um, I think a lot of us are being called to engage with people in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of people who are um, kind of having a combativeness with their way that they view things in the world, or their beliefs, or their assumptions, and there's a lot of aggression and turmoil happening um, across the world right now. And part of it is, possibly because people have wounds that they're needing to heal that are being brought to the surface. Maybe they have corns that are being stepped on by the changes and shifts that are happening right now. There's a lot of unknown. But how we show up each and every day, how we interact with each other, the space we hold for each other, the ability that we have to be open to questioning a situation, and the openness around, having an awareness around how people view things and where they're coming from and why they're coming from that space, rather than jumping to conclusions and jumping toward aggression. I think that gives us a flavor of how we lead, if we lead with a big stick or if we lead by example. And I think we're going to see some big shifts. We've already seen a lot of big shifts in 2025, and they are going to continue. And the people that we surround ourselves with and the things that we do with our day are ultimately going to make a bigger difference, not only in our own personal lives and in our families' lives and in our friends' lives, but in the community that we live in with one another. So I send you a lot of love. I send you a good wish. If you are interested in my tarot deck, you can find it on my website at rootsofalchemy.com. You can also find some of my art and others, body care and skincare and wellness products there as well, if you'd like to support me and what I do. And then, of course, if you'd like to offer a donation for my free readings, you're welcome to do that. And if you'd like to schedule a reading, you can reach out and do that as well. I hope you have a good week. I hope you are tending to yourself, remembering to eat good food, drink water, spend some time outside, play with your creatures, share time with your friends, call your family, all the good things. Because what we fill our days with is so important. Bye for now.